Welcome to the presentation, and thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today. We're going to address the very popular topic of making a robotics a reality. This will directly cover how to plan and implement the right solution to position your business for the future. I am Kyle Cooper. I work as part of the Emerging Technology Group at Yale, specifically with robotics. My role is to guide customers through their automation journey from exploration through customer success and account growth. A big part of this journey is identifying applications and architecting a robotic solution specific to your needs. We'll discuss this more in here in just a minute, so let's jump in. During our presentation, there are some important things we want you to listen for. First, we're going to cover why so many businesses are exploring automation, and that's more than just the long-term labor trends. Next, we'll help you understand how your operation can make use of robotic lift trucks, including how to identify best fit tasks and workflows, ideal operating conditions, and more. Finally, we'll cover how to get from point A to point B with advice on how to achieve a successful implementation and avoid common pitfalls. Let's start with the basics. Why are you here? A common reason businesses look into automation is that they need to scale. You may be working as part of a strategic initiative to equip the business to deliver on growth promises. Or you may be reevaluating how you do business in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. With social distancing measures in place, you can't pack as much labor into the same space you could previously. And last but not least, labor. The ever-present supply chain challenge. Operations commonly look to reduce their dependence on a dwindling labor pool. But what I'm hearing from customers like you, it's because of all these reasons. Businesses depend on logistics to enable growth. And logistics, well, they depend on labor. Labor is now the shaky foundation, difficult to find, more difficult to retain and pay for, and it's not getting any better. Many of us have likely felt this pain. Captive labor pools, turning the same local employees. Businesses need to scale is or will surpass a local labor market. This includes accounting for your seasoned employees that are about to retire. Challenges in finding labor to work, example, third shift operation, freezer environments. And I'm curious what labor pains you're experiencing today. Turnover rates are increasing, now at 46%. Let's move over to the cost. High turnover contributes directly to declining productivity, which is down by about 17%. Damages, mispicks, misplaces, administrative, etc. I'm curious what your thoughts are on who'd perform better in a 10-foot aisle picking you from a 5th or 6th level. Your new guy or girl or somebody you've trained well and retained for a few years. Rising minimum wage. It's only a matter of time before some states start increasing wages. What about unions? This is a concern for a lot of my customers, specifically on the West Coast and in the New England states. They are looking to mitigate this before it becomes a reality. Onboarding costs to recruit and train are as well, especially in distribution hubs where qualified, skilled labor environments are even more competitive. So why automate now? Labor is most discussed topic when pursuing automation, but it's certainly not the only one. COVID-19 limits the labor available or willing to work. How many of you had an employee take a COVID test and then call in until the results were received? How many allergies or colds are causing employees to call in when they wouldn't have done that in the past? The real challenge is that your business is likely flourishing while the labor cannot keep up. And so what will the net result of hiring too fast or less qualified workers be? How many of you are familiar with Moore's Law? Generally speaking, it states that as technology matures, it becomes more capable and less expensive at an exponential rate. For example, the average smartphone of today, it has over 1 million times more memory and more than 100,000 times more processing power of the computer used in the Apollo 11 mission. Yes, the smartphone you have in your pocket right now. Taxes. Recent government action has also worked to encourage automation. You may recall the tax reform from 2017. Well, because of that, you can now write off the full depreciation of capital investments in the first year. That's versus the 10 years in the prior. It's not just hydrogen fuel cells or solar anymore, it's now robotics. Positioning for the future, one of my favorite topics. Industry 4.0, digital transformation, they're all fueling corporate initiatives and encouraging them to evolve and prepare for the future. Robotics is one of those key pillars in this paradigm, and it fits well into the digital connected enterprise. When you're trying to figure out what jobs might be a good candidate for robotics, consistent staffing challenges are often a reliable indicator. This can take a variety of forms. For one, availability can be a challenge. The local labor pool may be maxed out, leading to rehiring problematic staff and the need to provide transportation for workers from the closest population center. Turnover is another important element. The cost of constantly hiring and retraining is high. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, turnover across the warehousing industry was at 46.1% in 2019. Automation can actually help improve retention by enabling operations to repurpose employees to more engaging, value-added tasks. For example, scientists have found that monotonous work can negatively impact mental health. It can cause major stress and lead to burnout and inconsistent performance. In the paper, Neuroscience Reveals That Boredom Hurts, Dr. Judy Willis, a neurologist and former classroom teacher, claims that when we're bored, our judgment, goal-directed planning, risk assessment, focus, and control over emotions all suffer. Regarding employee engagement, robotics can play a part in shaping more meaningful work experiences. Improved job satisfaction is significant for individual employees, but it's also a boom to operations. According to a Gallup study, organizations with better employee engagement achieve higher performance, including substantially better retention, fewer accidents, and increased productivity. Now that we've covered the signs you may have an opportunity for robotics, let's take a look at what robotics can do. Repeatable task, long horizontal movements, vertical movements up to 34.5 feet, and most racking and storage systems. Think point-to-point load transportation, picking up a pallet and moving it elsewhere, high volume bulk storage, dense racking, ASRS. There are now solutions capable of lifting, storing, and retrieving loads from elevated storage areas. Given those characteristics of robotics, what tasks can they take care of in your operation? From trailer unloading to receiving, through put away and retrieval, conveyor to conveyor transfer with fork trucks or conveying roller carts, value-added service, case pick, layer pick, outbound trailer loading, trash runs, milk runs, and virtually everything in between. These can all be done by robotic lift trucks. Let's start with trailer unloading. In this animation, it shows the robotic lift truck enter the truck and pick a pallet. Most trailer loading configurations can be accommodated as long as it's a palletized and not falling over or loose boxes. You need dock locks and some sensors, but as long as we're talking about steel bottom over the road trailers, this may be for you. From the trailer, you can see that the robotic lift truck can bring single or double loads to your receiving staging area for inspection and to be scanned into your WMS. From the staging area, you can have automated lift trucks put away in racking or bulk storage. In this animation, the WMS created a mission for the robot, and it'll use its technology to detect the open pallet position and precisely place that pallet in the 3-high position, as you can see on the screen. In the second example, when we're looking at palletizers or even wrapping stations, robotic lift trucks can be dispatched once the pallet is ready and then take to a staging area, to racking, into your freezer, or even another conveyor system. In this case, it's selective racking. In this video, we're going to see trailer loading, and you can see that the robotic lift truck can carry single or double pallets fully autonomous into the trailer and can accommodate just about any trailer loading pattern. Let's take a look at the robotic reach truck. In this example, it's going to lift its container to a second high position. The 3D camera will drop down. It will perform a digital scan of the bay to ensure that there's no people, there's not another pallet, or it's not an unsafe depositing location. Once it confirms it, it will resume with its deposit operation. It will proceed forward. It knows based upon its digital path and its LiDAR where it is exactly within the facility and how close it is to that racking. It will begin to deposit and then retract back so it can resume or proceed with its next operation. When a robotic lift truck begins to engage a pallet, It will raise its forks to relatively close to the position. It will use its 3D camera to scan the fork openings to adjust its side shift left or right and its approach. Once it confirms its exact location and fork positions, it will proceed with that picking operation. In this case, it's picking a container from the first level. Once it engages this container, pallet detection sensors will be engaged, informing the robotic lift truck that the pallet is securely against the lower backrest. Once that's on, it will proceed to its deposit location. Through its navigation technology, it knows where all other obstacles and robotic lift trucks are, so it can choose the fastest path from point A to B. Looking at a double deep pick with the robotic reach truck, it'll perform a similar pick as it did with the single deep reach. And in this case, the 3D camera will scan the pallet to ensure its fork positions are evenly located on that pallet. Once that's confirmed, it'll proceed with the pick. It will extend its pantograph out, pick the pallet or the container, and proceed on to its deposit location. Once those paddle sensors are engaged and that pallet is securely against the lower backrest, you can see that the robotic reach truck will then begin to retract its pantograph and proceed to its deposit location. Now that we talked about what tasks robotics are suited for, we need to cover some more information to qualify your operation. First, outdoor applications are a no-go. The navigation technology must be used indoors. Pooled water, heavy dust, and sharp inclines or declines are also not conducive to successful robotic operation. We have high level of complexity listed, and what that means is operations that require human judgment. Think of an operation where a pallet may be pushed or dragged, and the operator needs to be aware and attentive in case the load shifts. Someone walks in front or behind of the load. This would not be safe for the robot and thus be better suited for people. From a financial point of view, multi-shift operations are positioned to reap the fastest ROI. Next, the higher labor cost, the more financial sense and faster ROI for robotics. Robotics are also very useful in reducing manual touches, which is a key component of their potential to relieve labor challenges and further drive ROI. Now let's do a temperature check. With automation in sight, what's your biggest concern when it comes to implementing automation? Is it failure to live up to promised potential? A lack of future adaptability? Mismanaged integration process? Project delays? Costs growing out of control, or other? One of the most notorious failures and often overlooked is project management. Poor expectations in the beginning, poor planning of resources, and misscheduled timelines kill complex technology projects. Robotics is high up on that list. Let's discuss common pitfalls. Find a partner you trust and trust them. Many companies want to position robotic vendors against one another to drive down costs or evaluate solutions, even though they aren't necessarily apples to apples. This causes many distractions, a lack of trust. It limits communication and will probably increase your cost at the end. When you identify a robotic partner and truly partner with them, the savings, the experience, and the success will all be transparent and shared at the end. Evaluate the partner based on the business you do with them today, or the level of service they can provide, the breadth of capabilities, and their overall success in the robotic space. From boardroom to shop floor, robotic projects affect stakeholders at all levels of the organization. And if there's a gap at any level of the organization, it can prevent the expected benefit of robotic investment from becoming a reality. When you give Tom the firm proposal and he's not fully on board, you've just wasted a lot of time. Sorry to any Toms out there. An internal champion is one of the most valuable steps to avoid those obstacles. Everyone has a full workload to manage above the automation project. Responsibility and accountability ensures that the project is not pushed to the side or kicked down the road. If everyone looks at each other and says, not I, the project won't happen. One of the most effective ways to avoid all these common pitfalls is appointing an internal champion. Ensuring the project is moving forward, providing vendors with the information they need when they need it, and it will also help drive cultural acceptance internally. When someone at the local level reassures Bob and Jim that they're not going to lose their jobs to automation, they believe it. They believe it more than if Sally comes down for the first time for a town hall. Risk to avoid with the champion: make sure they themselves believe in the technology and the project, and that they're likely going to be around for the duration of the project. Turnover in this position can delay and derail robotic installation, cause communication gaps, they slow the timeline and it gets pushed. Critical legacy knowledge leaves and it has a negative impact on the overall project. When it's time to scope out what robotic solution looks like, a vendor will need the following information: facility CAD drawing, preferably with stops and aisles highlighted, so we know what areas we need to evaluate. Detailed understanding of current operations and environment. Low definition, dimensions, weight ranges. Throughput level so we can analyze the number of trucks required. Aisle widths that we'll be operating within. Travel distance, because it plays a vital role in the total number of robotics you're going to need. Future goals and automation vision. Let's talk about this one real quick. If you're going to upgrade a WMS or you're evaluating automated shuttle systems, please let us know. If you have an automation vision, also please let us know. We can potentially save a lot of pain and unnecessary cost. There are two common approaches when we look at transition potential into reality. There is the what will save the most money and what is the easiest to implement. Simple or easiest first are good to create momentum and they get people on board. More experience is always better, right? This type of an application would typically be no WMS integration, a pick and drop to a pick and drop or zone to zone. Look for repetitive and consistent tasks, like moving from a palletizer or a wrapper to bulk storage, staging, or another conveyor. Look for consistent pallet load type and size. Simple is really good if you're struggling to get started or to minimize cost while you're beginning your journey. The opposite end of the spectrum on approaches would be to focus on the highest ROI. Look at the material flow at each start and stop point, rack and stack your applications, and assign an estimated ROI or ROE. This is where you make your automation partner do all the work, wink, wink. This approach is preferred by most procurement groups because it's how they look at capital allocation, highest ROI first. Okay, so now what? Armed with this information, what are your next steps? As you plan for the future, consider robotics and work with a robotic expert. Whether you're upgrading racking or trying to optimize material flow, or you finally have the time to evaluate zone picking, plan for automation and make sure you have correct aisle widths. You have the spacing to take into account the safety zones. There's a lot of things to consider when you're looking at robotics for the future. It's important to note that even if you're preparing for another type of automation, like layer picking or ASRS shuttle systems, keep robotic lift trucks in mind. I have a lot of horror stories about not factoring in the right amount of space or the right amount of considerations for robotics. One is that aisles were 3 inches too narrow. Another was that the building layout had columns in the wrong spots. Countless freezers that were designed without automation in mind. Automated shuttles, for example, those vendors, they love to use every inch of a facility. But if the robotics cannot pick from every bay, you spent too much money and you now have a lot of wasted space. Before we transition to some questions, remember the key takeaways. Today's robotics makes more sense than ever due to labor, increased capabilities, and even the benefits driven by tax code. Example, the full depreciation in 1 year on CapEx purchases. 2, you can use robotics in a variety of ways, whether you're moving goods from point to point horizontally or even from an elevated location. It's a matter of understanding the intersection between positions where your business struggles with labor and robot capabilities. And lastly, but not least, a successful implementation does not happen by accident. Watch out for common pitfalls we listed and take the job of an internal champion seriously. Their work is indispensable to the success of a project. Of course, there's no way to cover everything related to robotics in this time frame, so I wanted to cover some frequently asked questions related to and outside of what's been covered thus far. Common questions. Can you lease robotics? There are several options to lease. The big questions are, do you want to own the robot for depreciation benefits, or are you looking to avoid the CapEx process and manage it with your operating budget? There are pros and cons to both, but what is common is most of the time you can roll hard costs and soft costs into the lease, so you don't have to pay anything until you are fully set up and running. Robots as a service is a term you may have heard, and it is very similar to the operating lease. Just read the fine print when you're pitched the robots as a service solution. Question 2. What types of maintenance options exist? Maintenance is an important consideration. Robotic lift trucks don't take breaks and work long hours. It's important to work with your local dealers or your vendor on available maintenance plans that align with your needs. If you aren't getting what you need, you should probably look at another vendor. This should be a deciding factor and one you look at for robotics. Last thing you want is to be left with a robot you cannot use or one you cannot depend on. Question number 3, what about safety? With performance level D rated sensors and dedicated travel paths, robotics are often more safe than your manual operations. Some robotic companies have not had an OSHA reportable incident in 30 or 40 plus years. You should probably work with somebody who takes safety that serious. You should also make sure your vendor is ANSI B56.5 compliant, and training is a key piece of the deliverables. So thank you for your time today. I appreciate this presentation, and I am open for questions.